Welcome to the Denverse. I'm Derek.
I'm Quinn.
And we are talking about the Denver Nuggets, who have advanced to the conference semifinals after knocking off the Portland Trailblazers in 6 games. It is the first time the Nuggets have ever eliminated an opponent in a 7-game series on the road. And it's the first time they've won a playoff series in 6 games in the Nikola Jokic era.
Right.
So obviously, we'll probably talk a lot about Game 5, but just tell me what your feelings were after watching the Nuggets take down Portland last night.
It felt uncanny and weird. Like I had all this misplaced stress that just had to dissipate because I was totally expecting a Game 7. And then just to see the Nuggets were getting just outmatched for most of the game. And then it's always a surprise. The Nuggets have been a scrappy team for several years where they will fight back. And it's oftentimes you feel better if they're going into the fourth quarter a few points behind than with a big lead. And it just felt like within that last 5 minutes of the game, all of a sudden it got so easy. Things were just working out for them. And that's not how I've been conditioned to feel as a Nuggets fan. Even some of the calls felt favorable.
The Rivers running into Lillard at least should have been a foul. And Lillard talked about that after the game where he was like, yeah, that completely threw me off my rhythm, which is on him a little bit, but also how they didn't call a foul is just kind of crazy.
For that one, I don't know exactly which one because there are a few times I was like, oh, well, if you're going to call on Damian Lillard, Lillard gets those calls.
Yeah, it was the one where he ended up on the ground for 5 seconds, and I didn't see live what happened, but then I saw the replay, and he and Rivers just collided, and it really seemed like they would call the foul on the Nuggets.
Oh. Well, the two that stood out to me, which also felt like big momentum ones, was the foul they called on Nurkic on Jokic's 3 attempt, where he actually didn't touch Jokic, and then the out of bounds where it looked like it was definitely off of Jermichael Green instead of Carmelo. I'm not here to complain about that at all. It happens. It's okay. But it just was so unnerving to see the Nuggets just look oh, snap, they're going to win this. They're going to pull it off, and it's going to be simple, and I don't have to stress out tomorrow to wait for Game 7.
And let's say by simple, they played really bad in the first half. We're only in the game because Porter went crazy in the first quarter. And then in the third quarter, we're down almost 20 points. I don't know exactly how big it got, and then we're able to come back and make it 3. So it was not simple at all. That was not how anyone would draw up how you win a basketball game.
No, not at all. Because Porter was incredible in the first 7 minutes of the game.
Yeah.
Where, and outside of now Luka and Trae Young, I guess Devin Booker as well, I've just not ever seen a player who is just going to hit the shot regardless. And Porter, I think, still 50% of his shots are not advisable, but they just go in. But you could kind of tell from that point, it's the Nuggets really need to get a different rhythm because he cannot score every single point in this game.
Yeah, and the one thing, I've thought a lot about that Portland series from 2 years ago, in the comparisons between these two series, because it was basically Jokic had to win the game for them or else they couldn't win. And that was really the difference, was that Jokic plus someone had to win each of these games. And Jokic got in foul trouble early, and because of Porter, they were able to stay in it. And that's what they didn't have 2 years ago. It's the only game of the series where Jokic had any foul trouble. The last 2 playoffs, there have been more 2 years ago where Jokic would get in foul trouble every single game, and it was no one was there to help pick up the pieces, and you were just how is this going to work? And they were able to stay in the game this time, which to me was the biggest jump forward, where it was just Jokic and help this time. And for Portland, it was Lillard and nobody. And then I was worried about Game 6 because he actually had help for the first time. Everyone else seemed to be playing well in the first half, and you were we have no chance if we can't stop any of these people.
Yeah, I was like trying to convince myself, like, okay, so right now the Nuggets are like having a harder time scoring. Like all of the points they were scoring seemed difficult. I
Yeah.
was like, but it's almost too easy for Portland. And I thought about that logic. I was like, that actually doesn't bode well for the Nuggets. It's the shots aren't going to drop later. But yeah, I think the whole story of this series has been, of course, Jokic, but then also now with MPJ, it was those two who were going to be solid and reliable, and then one other person. So we got Austin Rivers, got Monte. I think game two actually Millsap like put in some great bench minutes, and last night it felt a little more dispersed. But you then just had everyone just fall into place in the fourth quarter, and that I think that was seeing them gel in a way that I hadn't since Murray's injury.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I think sort of within this game, we can really talk about all of the things the Nuggets did well or poorly in the series. And starting with, I think we should talk about the two losses because they had some similar qualities in that the Nuggets just had disastrous third quarters in both of them. And it wasn't as bad in game one. It was still really bad. They were completely out of the game because the third quarter in game four, Portland scored 36, the Nuggets scored 19, and the Nuggets were already behind. So the game was over.
Yeah,
In game one, it wasn't quite as bad, but the spread was almost exactly the same. Um, it was 38 to 25 in game one. And so that was the thing the Nuggets did well in the third quarter this time was they actually won the quarter when they were way behind. So what changed? Because we've known that the Nuggets' weakness has been third quarters the whole season, and it was in every game of the series except for this last one. So what changed for the Nuggets last night that they did well in the third quarter?
I think they capitalized off of momentum. Like the big worry for me in the first quarter was that they were only scoring after Portland missed,
Mm-hmm.
but they couldn't keep up scoring back and forth. Um, so I think they in the third quarter they settled down. Jokic got more aggressive. It's interesting. Like I got to give my props to Nurk. It really did feel like if Nurk is able to stay out of foul trouble, it's going to be really tough. Like so far, Nurkic looks like the strongest center to play against Jokic,
Yeah.
and a guy who I'm sure is absolutely fired up anytime he gets a chance to
Yeah.
match up against him.
And that really worked for the most part for the first 5 games, and then that completely fell apart. And I mean, the 4 quick fouls that Nurkic got just completely changed the game.
Yeah, so I think that's one big thing is so Nuggets capitalizing on momentum, but being more in the driver's seat on the offensive end, but then also just adjustments. Like the halftime adjustments seemed to work, and there's nothing that you can do for stopping Dame Lillard,
Mm-hmm.
but he started missing shots, so that was one thing. And they were Nuggets were just able to get the ball moving. Um, Monte Morris was able to put in some good buckets, and it just felt like more of an overall game because actually Porter kind of disappeared in the second half, which is I think part of like his next step is he has a hot quarter but can't
And
keep it up for the whole.
and if it's true, like the fact that he told Malone to keep Green in instead of bring him in the fourth quarter was like that was an unselfish thing that definitely helped the team last night.
That wasn't you look at Porter just because he feels like our unicorn. People were calling for Malone to be fired for not playing him earlier in his career.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, if you like, I was watching the game happening, feeling the anxiety, and then I noticed I was like, Porter's not in the game. Why is Porter not in the game? Coach, what are you doing? But then they like cut to him after somebody scored, and he was smiling the biggest smile. And I mean, that's just an amazing thing about teams buying in, especially if you look at the Lakers and how they unceremoniously bowed out. Like, you can tell this team is having fun with each other. And they
Mm-hmm.
truly just believe, like, yeah, okay, we're going to have a bad game, but we've got this. And
Yeah,
it's like,
Sorry,
Sorry, just looking to Jokic,
yeah.
like we have him, so we'll be okay.
Yeah, and I mean, I think that when you looked at the two benches and the two teams, like the Nuggets bench was always engaged in the game. It's clear that they really care about each other. And Portland, I think that they like each other, but there was never that like we're gonna lift you up. We're gonna be the lift for your team. And I think that I think it's rare that the Nuggets are like this. We've known this for a while, but I think that the rest of the country is now seeing like, oh, the Nuggets actually have something more special than we thought, and something rare in the NBA. Like I think last year Bill Simmons did a thing where it's like, who isn't unhappy? And it was like Denver and one other team, and every other team in the NBA was unhappy at that point before the bubble. Um, and so I think that was something that I really like. I think Malone deserves a lot of credit. There was some things in Game 5 that I wasn't happy with Malone, but otherwise, like he's really done a lot. And like that hug slash kiss between him and Jokic at the end of the game was just like, it's great that we've come this far.
I like Jokic. He did it to Lillard, Nurkic, and Carmelo. Like when they hugged, he like put his hand on the back of their head, which was like nurturing almost.
Yeah,
And it was like, okay, this dude truly does feel his oats. He is like a fully realized superstar in this league.
yeah, no, I completely agree, and I think that like that was the thing, and that's the thing for the rest of the Western Conference now that LeBron's gone, is that the Nuggets will have the best player in every series they play until the finals, if they make it to the
Mm.
finals. And that just completely changes the series because if you have the best player, you always have a chance to win. And even though like Lillard had the shooting that he did, he wasn't the best player on the floor. Even in that, like the Nuggets won the Game 5 overtime game because Jokic was still overall the best player at the end of the game.
Totally.
Um,
And the team was
yeah.
on a whole.
So another thing about Game 1 that it didn't end up playing out was all of the Carmelo Anthony drama, where it looked like the X factor of the series might be Melo because of the way he was playing in Game 1, and the national media was so mad that the Nuggets fans were booing him, and then that immediately stopped as soon as he got that technical on Jokic in Game 2. So, like, how do you think about Melo in this series?
Okay, well, I'm gonna go on record and say I think it's kind of corny to still be booing Melo. Like I get it, but just so much has happened in between. And for me, like I fell in love with basketball in the Melo era. So
Hmm.
it's just the first 5 years, it was I had fun booing. It just doesn't feel fun anymore. But I felt some type of way about it at first because there was also like a video that a fan posted himself being just an absolute asshole to players. And I was like, you can't call grown men these words. It just like it didn't vibe with me. But then I saw the bad behavior in the rest of the league, and I was kind of like, oh, actually, Nuggets fans were chill. It's okay. Um,
The worst thing they did was boo. They didn't run on the court. They didn't call anyone really horrible names, as far as we know. Didn't
you,
throw water bottles at anybody. I mean, that was the weird. Like, there are some NBA fans that clearly have not handled the pandemic well. Like, that was one of my takeaways of the first round in general.
dude, I like my job is nothing about like emotion. It's nothing but emotional,
Hmm.
like intelligence and stability and expression of emotions and even masculinity. And especially, I think the dude who threw the stuff at Kyrie after he stepped on the logo, I was like, this is a fella who really just needs to talk to other people about his life. Um, so yeah, I think again. So I am not in the boo camp.
Yeah, me either. I was there and I did not boo. Um, so that I will go down as that. I will also say that I understand that everyone deals with breakups in different ways, and so I do. I'm not gonna fault anyone for booing. Melo did not leave on good terms, but
True, but I feel like after year 5, so like the common knowledge that I learned about breakups is that you have half of the length of the breakup to grieve the breakup. So we had 8 years with Mello. That means 4 years to hate him, and then you just got to move on. So I just feel like we're like salty exes, even though like, we're actually in a better position. Like we're married, we have a beautiful family, and yet we're still like, "Ugh, I'm gonna stalk your page."
um, So then game 2 happened, and really I think the turning point in the series was Malone put Gordon on Lillard in the second half of game 2, and it completely changed how Lillard played, and then the Nuggets played him differently. It didn't always work, obviously, but I think that that was a huge move, and I think that Gordon was very underrated in what he did this series. Like, he showed up on defense a lot, and he showed up at the right times on offense, including that three he made last night that started the run in game 6.
Yeah. And like credit to him, it's low volume, but I think he's at 50% shooting from three in the playoffs, and that's just not what we've been expecting. And I think in our last episode, I was talking about how like kind of unimpressive he's been, but yeah, it just don't want to call it. He's a lowercase X factor in terms of the game. Like there's times where he can disappear, but it was clear that Portland's offense saw him and felt his presence. So that was really cool.
And I think, as a starter, he was one of the 5 best players for the Nuggets because Facu wasn't and Morris was. And I think like, you want all your starters to be your best 5 players. And obviously, talent-wise, Morris is now the closer for the Nuggets. So I think that sort of worked out.
Yeah, and he's not like the Nuggets don't have a big 3 without Murray right now.
Yeah.
But they've got a giant 2 and then just like solid role players. And I think Gordon's the most valuable of that group.
Yeah, I think that's true. So they won that game, split at home, and then Austin Rivers won game 3 for them in quite a performance that I still don't quite have words for. I mean, we knew that Austin Rivers was a good player, but I didn't think he was going to win a game for the Nuggets in this series.
No, not at all. Like, I mean, that's where, is it the coaching staff? Do they just really have the ability to pull the absolute most out of guys? It was like, game 5, Marcus Howard had a bit of a showcase himself. But yeah, I mean, Rivers, you could just tell, like, this is a dude who cares. And, of course, there's the viral gif of him, like, thanking God after Lillard missed a shot. But he's just, like, a solid veteran presence, a guy who understands his role. He dribbles absolutely too much for my liking. But more times than not, he makes the right play, and he's, like, gotten hot at the right times in terms of, all right, he's going to put the ball in the hoop when you need him to.
Well, and I think that, the Nuggets, it felt like they didn't have any guards going into this series. They had a backup point guard that we knew was more than a backup point guard in Morris. And then you had Facu Campazzo, Austin Rivers starting for you, and then the Howard and maybe Shaq Harrison are your other guards without Dozier or Barton or Murray. And it was just like, well, this is why they have no chance, because they may only have one of the best 5 guards in this whole series, and that's a really hard way to play.
Yeah, absolutely. But, like, Facu, God bless him, the dude could not get to the rim to score at all. Like, it's his inability to score at the rim is only matched by his ability for those amazing outlet passes. But yeah, I mean, it was like such an offensive deficit in that regard when you're going up against Lillard and McCollum and even Anthony Simons, who, like, I don't know, Terry Stotts may be fired by now even.
Yeah.
But I thought it was strange that they were not utilizing him more. And Norman Powell, he like had that incredible, game 4 that absolutely doomed the Nuggets.
Yeah, and I mean, I think, everyone talked about Powell being the 3rd best player, and we just didn't see that enough. 3rd best offensive player for Portland. And I think that if you're on the Portland side, on top of all of the other problems, where everything from like Danny Ainge is going to come in here and save this to everybody's about to leave. Those are the 2 extremes that we're dealing with right now with Portland. The fact that you couldn't get anyone, like, there is sort of where the Nuggets were 2 years ago. No one showed up enough for Lillard, and Nurkic showed up the most, but he couldn't stay in the game. And you're just like, oh, it would be if this was the other side, like we would have expected this year from the Nuggets, but we would still be very disappointed.
Yeah, that's and as someone who doesn't hate Melo, it kind of felt like with him and Lillard, they had a team of destiny vibe to them.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why I'm still just so shocked. The Nuggets 1-6.
Well,
I
and
don't
yeah,
I don't
sorry.
necessarily believe in home cooking or like rigging, but if I'm the NBA, a lot of the series so far have been duds or like not even a question. This was the most competitive and electric one. Adam Silver wanted a game 7.
Yeah, and I mean now the weekend schedule is just pretty sparse because the Nuggets and Phoenix aren't even going to play till Monday. So like you got
Yeah.
3 games this weekend because of this. So I think that the other thing with the Melo thing sort of culminated in Game 5, and I guess let's talk about that game now. But the fact that Melo couldn't even play all of overtime, that just like halfway through the first overtime, just took Melo out, and we're like, okay, we're done with Melo. He can't go anymore. Like that sort of summed up everything of where Melo is. Like he added a few sparks in this series, but not enough, and I don't think he really has. At best, I think he can be a Paul Millsap for somebody going forward, where it's like if you're relying on him for 6 to 8 minutes a night, maybe you're fine, but anything more, you're asking too much.
Yeah, I mean, he's better than Kyle Kuzma.
Mhm.
So that's the floor that we can set. And yeah, the ceiling is I mean, he's increased his value in his career. I think he was a great fit for Portland in some ways, but yeah, just he was not able to maintain the stamina necessary to be that X factor we were afraid he was going to be in the first game.
Yeah. So Game 5, which will be the game we remember most from the series, Nuggets had a 20-point lead in the second quarter, completely blew it by halftime, and it felt a lot like the Game 7 from 2 years ago, which actually, my friend Jeremy, apparently we met up with him at halftime of that Game 7, which I don't remember at all because I just remember being in despair about that game. And he just was like, you guys were really down on the Nuggets at halftime that game. That's all I remember. And it was like, well, we were right. So I don't know. I don't know what you wanted, but that was sort of how I felt. And I was at the game for Game 5, and that was sort of how I felt. Where it was just like, I can't believe we're doing this again, especially because I had felt so good after Game 3, where I was like, okay, like the Nuggets are unstoppable, and then Game 4
Mm-hmm.
happened, and then it was like, man, if you lose Game 5, this thing's gonna be over really quickly.
At home, yeah, the the lead, just like the way they were playing, which is still fascinating to me about basketball, is that like a 20-point lead is not incredible. We saw it last night almost.
Yeah,
Um, but just like the way they were playing, it felt again like so simple, so easy that it was like, oh, there's just really no answers that Portland can bring out. And it didn't even feel like the Nuggets started playing dumb in the second quarter.
yeah.
But shots just started to fall. Lillard turned it on a little bit, and very quickly, yeah, it was that feeling of old, like, oh, this is what I get for having hope.
Yeah, and I mean they fell behind early fourth quarter. It wasn't going well, and then they turned it around and started stepping it up. And Jokic was leading that charge, and then Lillard just wouldn't miss for 6 minutes or whatever, and just could make any single shot he wanted to in the end
That
of regulation.
when I think, and I texted you, it's like it felt like the Nuggets were gonna lose. So my like silver lining was like, well, you're getting to watch an all-time performance,
Yes.
and I felt bad for him at the end of it.
Yeah, I mean, and I think that the parallel is just we saw how hard Jokic played in the 4 overtime game 2 years ago and then lost, and that was so crushing. And I mean, I ultimately ended up being the difference in that series, and it was like the same thing for Lillard. Like he did all of that, and they still lost. Like that's really hard.
Yeah.
Um, and I think that it wasn't clear that he was ever going to miss, and then when he finally did, it was like, okay, the Nuggets can turn this around, And that was only in the second overtime because he did it again in the first overtime. And they had like a 10-point lead in the first overtime early. And you're like, oh, they're cruising, and it just completely evaporated again.
And evaporated is the only word, but it's just shot after shot after shot. I'm sorry if I keep darting around.
No, it's okay.
Huge storm clouds over me right now.
And you got the New York traffic. Like he's really in New York, guys. If you can't tell from the horns in the background.
Right, don't let this actually nice looking kitchen fool you. Actually, my apartment's fine, but I'm definitely in the city in a small New York City spot. But yeah, I think that's the big divide there was that at a certain point it just became the Lillard show, and it kind of froze out his teammates in a way. Mm-hmm. Like you let him take every shot, but the Nuggets had to like keep punching with different players, whereas it was at one point 1v5, and I think by the time poor CJ, I like CJ McCollum, but then by the time he got the ball, like mentally was not in a place to play as clutch as his teammate.
Yeah, and I mean he won some games for them 2 years ago. He didn't win any games for them this year. The games that he did well, they lost.
Yeah, well, that's like without Torrey Craig, the Nuggets couldn't shut down Lillard the way that they did in that series.
Yeah.
So he got his points, but just no one else was able to step up enough. All of their, like I look at that Portland team, that's one of the best Portland teams. Like you would trade Robert Covington over Al-Farouq Aminu any day of the week. Norman Powell over Rodney Hood any day of the week.
Yeah, I mean, that's true. The only thing that was different from 2 years ago was that they, other than Nurkic, they had no answer for Jokic, and that really played out after he fouled out in that game 5 because, Cantor became unplayable in game 2 after he hit him in the head, and it was like, okay, we can't do this anymore. And then they tried Melo a little bit, and that really didn't work, and Rondé Hollis-Jefferson, I mean, I don't even know that he ever tried to guard Jokic when he was in the game.
It really just is like, it doesn't matter your talent. You're too small.
Yeah. So they win that game, and in large part, the last 2 games, Jokic was their best player, but their most important player for both of those games was Monte Morris, and him really coming out. And I think I probably said on this podcast, or at least said to you, after the first month of the season, it was clear that Morris was the second best player on the team, and that was with Murray on the team. And Porter was in and out because he had the COVID thing and all of that. But through the first month, if you were going to say who was the second best player, it was Morris. Then he had the injury, and obviously Murray got better and seemed to have rested and all of that. And you come into the playoffs and you kind of forgot he was even going to be around because it had been so long since we saw him. And then he really showed up, and you saw everything that should get Nuggets fans excited about being able to have him on the court for this playoffs going forward. But then when you have him and Murray coming back next year, like that just gives you such a good finishing unit for the Nuggets.
Yeah, and so I'm just looking up now, like, I don't know if PJ Dozier is a free agent next year, but yeah, like there's a certain point that with Facu starting to emerge, PJ Dozier playing well, it really didn't feel like there was a space for Monte, and I felt bad. Like, dude definitely gave up money to stay with the Nuggets.
Yeah.
And like he is a starter for a lot of teams. And you think some of the teams that got bounced, like, he would have been great for the Knicks.
Yeah.
Would have been great for the Lakers. But he got to hit his free throws in clutch time. But absolutely, he has just a mentality. I think if there's anyone who embodies the culture of the Nuggets over the past several years the best, it would be Monte Morris, just in terms of a guy being coached to his full potential, a dude buying into the system, loving it and supporting his teammates. Wow, it is a hurricane happening outside.
I was like, it sounds like you're outside. No, that's crazy. Okay, so now it is storming in Quinn's house, if you're wondering what's going on with the audio.
There's a window. Yeah, there's a window that's like slightly doesn't close all the way, and I'm feeling rain on me. I'm
Oh
like
man.
10 feet away from the window.
Well, to wrap this up, I just wanted to say like the two images I will take from this series are Jokic's rebound put back at the end of game 2, where it was like somehow game 2 got really close again, and Portland missed the free throw. He didn't put it back. Portland misses the free throw with like 3 seconds left. No, the Nuggets did, right?
Yeah,
Nuggets,
it was Monte Morris.
Yeah, Morris misses the free throw. Jokic goes between two guys, and they end up winning the game that way by him putting it back. That, and then his pass to Porter in Game 5, where he waited, got the defender to cut with Gordon, and then the defender ended up on the ground. Porter was all alone in the corner, made that 3, and that ended up being the game winner of the double overtime game.
Oh yeah, dude. Absolutely. I'm ready to watch, like during the off season, the 12-minute breakdown of that play itself on YouTube. For me, I think it's the Austin Rivers, just thank God to Dame's miss, and then it is the series of hugs that Jokic gave to Portland players last night.
Yeah,
because it really was like a big brother consoling.
I think all of that is great, and I think also like the moment of the series is Jokic passes that ball to Porter, and he just starts walking back to get back on defense because he like knew it was over. He was like, "I don't need to do anything else. We're done."
Yeah, dude, that's so good. Chef's kiss.
And also the fan blowing kisses to Portland in Game 2.
Oh yeah, that's super awkward. Where it looked like you got.
Yeah. Well, this has been fun. We'll definitely check in about the Nuggets as they face the Phoenix Suns in a series where they'll be the underdogs, but they have some good matchups, and Phoenix is kind of hurt, so it'll be interesting to see what happens.
Yeah, we had enough to talk about. We didn't even talk about the Suns, but it's a series of two very underrated teams.
Yeah,
and it's going to be exciting for sure.
Yeah, well, tune in to the Denverse again soon, and we'll have more playoff updates from the Avs and Nuggets, and no Rockies talk, and we all know what the one Broncos episode would be, but nothing on that yet, so we'll talk to you soon.
Peace.